Yesterday we went through and talked about two formulas, which are the slope formula and the midpoint formula. And we did some examples with them. Today, we're going to focus on the distance formula. And the thing to know about the distance formula, I had said, by the way, to have these on the very back of the notes that are blank. So that should be plenty of space for you to write down any of the definitions that I've been doing in these notes and the formulas. That can be kind of your one place for them. So you should already have the slope formula written down there, the midpoint formula written down there. And now we've got the distance formula. The distance formula, the thing to know about the distance formula is that it comes from the Pythagorean theorem. If I treated, basically what it does is if we have some diagonal distance that we don't know, what we are able to find easily is the change in y and the change in x. So we're going to use that to build a right triangle that'll let us do Pythagorean theorem. So we're treating the change in y and change in x as a squared and b squared, and then using it to figure out c squared. And then since instead of c squared we want c, we're going to take the square root of it. So that's our distance formula. And so we're going to focus in today on doing some examples of how the distance formula is going to work. That's all we're going to focus on today. All right. We've done slope, we've done midpoint. We're not going to do part C. And because we're not going to do part C, we can't do part E either. We're just going to do part D here, which is finding A to B. Subtract your x coordinates squared plus subtract your y coordinates squared. This is the first example. So it should be on the second page. So subtract the x's squared plus subtract the y's squared. So we want to look, what are our x coordinates? Our x coordinates here are -5 and -2. -5 and -2 are our x coordinates. So we're going to be subtracting those. -5 minus a -2 squared plus subtract the y coordinates. The y coordinates here are 0 and 4. So we're going to take 0 and 4. Subtract them, squared. Equals -5 minus a -2. -5 minus a -2 is going to be -5 plus 2, which is -3 squared, plus 0 minus 4 is a -4 squared. -3 squared, this is important. If you have a negative and you square it, that's multiplying it by itself. So if you take a negative and square it, that's going to give you a negative times a negative, which is going to be a positive. So when I have -3 squared, -3 times a -3, that's a positive 9. Plus, same thing for -4 times a -4 is a positive 16. So we have 9 plus 16 is 25. So square root of 25 is 5. So 5 is our distance from A to B. All right, let's do one more of these distances. So we're going on to the next example, and we're going to find the distance between A to B here. And this was the example that I said yesterday that the answers we get should make sense. So you should be able to make a prediction here about what our distance from A to B is going to end up being. If I showed you that segment and asked how long it was, then the answer that you would think is probably what we're going to end up getting. So once again, we're going to write out our distance formula. Subtract your x's squared plus subtract your y's squared. My x coordinates here are 4 and 0. Those are my x coordinates, 4 and 0, so we're going to subtract them. Four minus 0, quantity squared, plus subtract your y's and squared. My y coordinates are 3 and 3. I'm going to subtract them. Squared. Equals square root. 4 minus 0 is 4 squared, plus 3 minus 3 is 0 squared, which equals the square root of 4 squared is 16 plus 0 squared is 0. So we just get 16 squared is 16 is 4. And one more thing here. I skipped part C, but I can actually do part E here. One more thing, A to M. I have the coordinates of M, so I could plug in and do the formula, but I don't really need to. Because A to M, if you remember yesterday, M was the midpoint of A to B. And a midpoint, you should know, should split the segment directly in half into 2 equal pieces. So if I have A to B, the entire distance is 4, but then I only go up to the midpoint, well then, that should split my distance in half. So it should be half of 4, which is 2. Questions on that? All right, those are all the notes that I have for you today. Just so you know, on Friday, you're going to have your first quiz, first thing that's going to go in the test section of your grade. That's going to be on everything we talked about these last 2 weeks. So everything with the segments, everything on those definitions with points, lines, and planes, everything with our formulas that we're talking about this week in the midpoint. So all of that is going to be fair game, and I'll hand out an assignment for you in just a minute that should give you a bit of review. You also have an online assignment that I gave, that I assigned on Friday. So if you've checked Canvas since then, that's due tomorrow. That gives you more practice from on last week's stuff.